Hello, I'm Doug Tembrock. Welcome to the Quality Management Training Track titled Q-Info Record Vendor Release. The Q-Info Record stands for Quality Information Record. This functionality is used to ensure quality is in the loop of releasing new materials, vendors, or revisions before purchasing can begin buying the material. This is great functionality that helps put quality in the driver's seat for ensuring purchased product is monitored and approved before the first buy is ever made. Some of my observations is that most sites I have been have a vendor release procedure. There is a line on the procedure that says anytime there is a new product, vendor, or revision that quality needs to review before it can go further. So I'm able to actually ask them, do you have a procedure? They come back and say yes. And they'll show me the procedure and the line on there that says they have to release. But in reality, what I find is happening most of the time is that they're not, all the other steps leading up to that is happening, but the step where quality has enough time to ensure product, pulling up past history, certifications that they've got from the vendor, maybe making a vendor site visit before they start buying is not always happening. So what ends up happening, we get this product in the door and find out we have a problem with it. And had we done the upfront analysis, we could have avoided it. So even though this is on the procedure, it's being bypassed. So when I talk about this functionality, what ends up happening on the sites is I'll have both groups, and I'll have the quality group and the purchasing group in there in the meetings, and I get a real positive from the quality group that they want this functionality, that they've been disappointed in the past, that they have not been in the loop better. And then on the purchasing side, I get a little bit of pushback because of, if we end up really following this process properly, they can't go out and rush to the buy and do the buy. But again, this is the procedure, this is policy, and it needs to be followed. So my response always is if this is already on the procedure, it should already be being followed, then what is the concern about implementing this? So we got to work through a little bit of that conflict between the two sites. Now let's look at the impact areas for the Quality Information Record vendor release functionality. Using this generic plant layout, I have highlighted three key areas: the vendor, purchasing, and quality assurance. Quality assurance is going to be responsible for setting up the quality information record, doing the actual release of the vendor and how far out the date to put on that release before purchasing can begin buying that product. And the impact of purchasing is if they try ahead of time to begin buying before that has been released, it's going to come up with an error on the bottom saying they can't. And then the vendor may be impacted with our procedural process. We may have to go out and do a site visit or contact them or ask them for a specific certification, but there'll be a process that may impact them, but that would be more from a procedural standpoint. Now let's look at the steps, some of the key steps for making this functionality happen. First, we're going to look at the material QM view. There's some key settings on there that need to be set before the quality information record is even looked at. The first item is what we call the QM procurement flag that needs to be checked on the quality management view. And then along with that is what we call a QM control key. And that tells there's functionality behind that configuration, behind that setting that says whenever you have this set, if purchasing goes to buy, there has to be a quality information record out there first. And then the next piece of functionality is the actual quality information record. So we then go over, and inside that quality information record, there's quite a bit of functionality. We're looking at one piece, a main piece here, which is dealing with vendor release. And once later, we're going to see other pieces of functionality inside that record as well. But our main focus is on the release. So there's a date. So we'll have the material, the vendor, and the rev if you're doing rev control, and the plant. And once we get in the record, we'll be able to say how far out date-wise we're going to release this. We also have a release quantity we can enter. So we can say that it might be released out for all year, but only for a specific quantity. So if you're going to do an initial buy, but you don't want them to be able to start buying large volumes until we've had a chance to look at this material and test it and ensure it works, we could say we're only going to allow 500 on the buy. And so if purchasee goes to buy and they try to do 600, it's not going to happen. It will block them. And then during the purchase order create, if this record is not put in place, as I said before, they're going to get that error on the bottom. So that would be the next key step, and then they need to then contact the quality group. Now let's look at an actual SAP demonstration of the vendor release functionality. First thing we're going to look at is the material master, where that key setting that I mentioned has to be set for the vendor release even to trigger. So we're going to go logistics, materials management, material master, material, change, and then I'm running MM02 transaction. And when I'm in this here, I'm using this material. And when the views come up, I'm going to select the quality management view and the plant, enter the plant. And it's this setting right here under the procurement data field here, this procurement active flag. That is the key. That says, first of all, that I'm going to be using the QInfo record. That's what that says. And then the next step is this quality control key. There's a list of keys here that I'm going to drop down, but the one, and there's different functionality that can be done with this quality info record, but what we're looking at is specifically for this track is vendor release. So I'm going to select this 0001 control key, delivery release. And that is all you need to set up on the material master. So imagine all your purchased materials, you'd have to set those flags for all your purchased items. I'm going to back out of that and close that up. And now what I want to do is we have that set, and what's going to happen now is I'm going to try to create a purchase order. I have not set up the quality information record yet, and that's what needs to happen because of that setting I just made. Purchasing may have all their records set up, like the purchase info record and source list, but quality has not done the release yet. So this is what's going to look like. So I'm going to go to Material Master, Materials Management, Purchasing, Purchase Order, Create, ME21N, Vendor Known. I'm going to click on that. Now I'm in the purchase order screen. The vendor I'm going to use is 2002. And then once again, our material I just was looking at, and I'll do a quantity of 10. Now I'm going to hit enter, and you're going to see what purchasing is going to see. See down at the bottom of this screen? It has that error message down at the bottom. No QInfo record exists for material and that material number. And so they're going to get stopped because we haven't done our release. So now what would typically happen is quality would get a phone call. Now, procedurally, we don't want it to happen like this. Procedurally, we want to be in the procedure before the buy is even attempted. Quality's done their process to ensure the vendor is okay. And this buy that they're beginning to do, we've authorized it. But now I'm going to back out of the purchase order screen, close this up, and go down to the quality management. So now quality management is, if they had gotten a phone call, but again, we prefer that not to happen. To me, if they get phone calls like that, it means we got a procedure that's not followed. But we're going to go quality management, quality planning, logistics master data, quality information record, procurement. And then, so we're going to select QI01 create. Transaction QI01. We'll enter our material. If it happened to be rev control, you need a rev, you need to release by rev. So I might have rev A and B released, but they now come out with C. I can't purchase again if they try to buy C. So we have to, for each rev, this particular material is not rev control. I need to enter the vendor that I was trying to use, and then the plant I was buying for. Hit enter. And on the first screen here, the key field we're looking at is this release date. Now some will use a date such as this, 1/1/2999. In other words, they're releasing forever. Some sites, so once they're released for good. Some sites have it though where they may use a year out, a date a year out or a couple of years out because they want to re-evaluate, re-release this vendor. So depending on your procedure, it depends on what date you put there. And then also, if you're doing a first buy, you may want to control, even though you've said we'll release it kind of indefinitely, but for the first buy, I only am going to allow them a certain amount. We would press this release quantity and enter amount here. So I might put something like 500 in there. And so purchasing is only able to have a quantity of 500 above that. They're stopped, so they get that same error message. But we're just going to use the date on this example. So I'm releasing it out kind of somewhat indefinitely there. I'm going to hit save. So now, you know, in there should be some investigating before you ever enter this record. At least checking historically how good is this vendor with this product, using some of the SAP history screens, going to check certificates and other things you do for releasing a vendor. Now I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to close up the quality management part, or the module, and I'm going to go back up to materials management module. Go materials management, purchasing, purchase order, create, ME21N purchase order create. Click on that. I'm going to enter my vendor again, my material, the quantity, hit enter. And this time, if you see, I've got, in this particular case, I have an information record, but it's only information. It's not an error. It's unrelated to that setting I just made. And so now I am past that setting, the QInfo record check, and now they're off and running. So that is how that hook or that strong integration is ties into the purchase order create. One more thing I want to show you. We have that's kind of the normal process, but of the vendor release. But there's also a really good program that you should be running proactively to see if maybe things are getting out of control once again. We're not in the loop again, even though we implemented this functionality. So if we go quality management, quality planning, logistics master data, quality information record procurement, and instead of this creating one record, we're using this QI06 collective processing. Now I use this QI06 collective processing when I'm setting them up for the very first time. So if I'm doing a go live, I'll run this program. So I'm clicking on this, and what this program allows us to do is, in this case, I'm going to put this plant in, and by hitting this only for purchasing info records, it will mass create quality info records, the quality info record side, for everything that has a matching purchasing info record, the records that purchasing use. So if I might have had 10,000 already purchased info records that we're buying from, when I run this program, it'll create me a matching 10,000 quality info record. It's like starting from day one, kind of grandfathering all the back ones in, the past ones, and then we start from there on any new ones. But it's also a really good tool. You're going to have to, so we can kind of run it in simulation mode. If I were to just put a release date, it's just so I can run it. So I'm not going to save anything. I just want to see and run execute. Hit the execute button. I am showing a list of items out here, a list of materials and vendors that have gotten out there that I have not released yet. So this should only ever really have a page or less. I mean, with the idea that the procedure should be coming around to us so we can approve it and manually create our quality info record. But if you see this start to be a really large list, 5, 6, 7 pages long, then chances are the procedure of releasing a vendor and having it done on time is not happening. They're doing stuff over on the purchasing side. We're not keeping up with it. And we're going to wind up getting these calls from the buyers when they can't purchase. We don't want that reactive. We want to be proactive. So it's a great program to proactively see how you're doing. I actually put it on what we call our daily health check report to see how it's doing. Now, let's review the effort involved in implementing Quality Information Record vendor release. Using a scale of light, medium, or difficult, I give this a rating of medium because of the change management needed to ensure purchasing and quality are ready to commit to the process. So there's quite a bit of upfront procedural work that needs to be worked out. The actual data loading, though, is a little lighter side because of the mass load program I had shown here on the actual demo. So we're able to take all the quality, create the quality info records initially matching all the purchase info records that you have. Now, to rate the risk for implementing Q-Info record vendor release, using a scale of small, medium, or high, I give this a rating of medium. That is if the process has a commitment from purchasing and quality. This is great functionality, and I believe all sites that have a vendor release policy should implement this functionality. Now, this concludes the Q-Info record vendor release track. Thanks for joining us.